we want people to think differently about neurodiverse employees, and specifically we're kind of focused on dyslexic employees. That's our area of specialism, and really understand that dyslexic thinking is a benefit.
Hello and welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders. This is a show where I speak with the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity and inclusion to help inspire, educate and motivate others to make the world a better place. Today, I'm joined by Martin McKay. He is the CEO and founder at Texthelp. Now, Texthelp is passionate about inspiring and educating others when it comes to education and technology. And I know Martin has a wonderful personal story that has really inspired him to continue with this journey, a successful journey of the organisation over a number of decades. Martin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Leila. I'm really happy to be here. It's fantastic to get a chance to talk with you online.
It's super to speak with you. I know that for many years we've exchanged messages back and forth, and finally doing some great collaborative work together, which is fantastic indeed. And I've always been inspired. I've watched from afar this great journey that you have been on with Texthelp, and I know it's inspired by a lot of your personal background as well. So for those listeners that perhaps don't know you and what you do as well as we do, talk to us about that journey and some of the work that you're doing right now and how you came to be where you are today.
Yeah, it's a long story. It started, the business started 27 years ago actually. But so for people who don't know about Texthelp, we are a technology company, a software company, and we make software tools for people with dyslexia and people who have difficulty with literacy and actually math in schools as well. A good part of our business is in education, but a growing and important part of our business is in workplace, and we're trying to provide tools for employers so that they can support neurodiverse employees, like employees with dyslexia and so on. So we've been doing it for about 27 years, but the reason why I got into it in the first place is when I was about 12 years old, my dad had a stroke, and it was a left brain stroke, and he lost then the ability to use his right arm and right leg. But left brain stroke also impacts speech, so he lost his ability to speak, couldn't really read or write or communicate very well, and he used to be a teacher, so he was always a very kind of articulate and driven person, and he just lost the ability to do all those things. That had a big impact on me when I was young. And when I was old enough, I've always been a bit of a geek, and kind of making things, and I got a computer when I was 12 and taught myself to code when I was that age. I started to make tools, software things to help people communicate, and I started out for people with strokes and motor neuron disease and cerebral palsy, that sort of thing. And started a little business selling it, and it started to work. And I was talking to a lady once in Scotland who I definitely owe a big bunch of flowers, and she told me that she had one student with cerebral palsy and about 200 students with dyslexia, and if I could do something to help dyslexic students, I could really reach a lot more people. And I didn't really understand dyslexia at that time. I was in my kind of early 20s and didn't really have a clue. And but I did some research. Actually ended up flying to California to meet a guy called Marshall Raskind, who had done a study on spelling disorders and was a real kind of specialist in dyslexia and learning difficulties. And he shared his research with me, and that helped me write our first dyslexic spell checker, because dyslexic people make some, kind of interesting and weird spelling errors that most spell checkers can't fix. And that was 25 years ago. We started, maybe even slightly longer than that, 27 years ago. And we started making software for kids with dyslexia, and kind of roll forwards until today. It's kind of hard to believe, but we've reached 50 million students in education around the world, and probably the same number of people. We've got accessibility tools for websites to help people with dyslexia and reading difficulties read websites aloud. And that's probably reached about the same number of people. And we've got offices now in, well, you can probably hear from my accent, Northern Ireland, is where we started. And but we've offices in, you know, Trondheim in Norway and Copenhagen and Sweden. We've got offices in Oslo and Malmo, and our US headquarters is in Boston. We've got about 100 staff now in the US. We have 350 staff around the world, and yeah, it's crazy to think about it. But yeah, it's grown into quite a big business, and we're helping quite a lot of people.
What an incredible story, Martin. And I know that your dad will be incredibly proud of all that has been achieved. And as a fellow dyslexic, I am truly passionate about how education can really inspire positive change and transformation, because neurodiversity is not a disease, it's something to be celebrated, it's something wonderful, and it allows that.
Yeah, I was talking about this to someone earlier on today. You know, this is one of the jobs that we have to do. We need to show the world that dyslexia is a good thing. It's a positive attribute, and people should look at neurodiversity the way that we look at height or eye color. It's just there are a range of people, and you know, the piece of our brain that we use for reading or spelling. Dyslexic people just use that for something else. So they may not be good at reading or spelling, but they're going to be brilliant at something else. And it's like kind of unlocking that superpower is the you know, is the important thing.
Couldn't agree more. It is an absolute superpower. And there's so many entrepreneurs as well who are dyslexic. Arguably, the tenacity that dyslexics and neurodiverse individuals bring is really quite incredible, because instead of going to the direct solution, they may go perhaps a little around the houses, but that shows creativity and innovation in terms of the way they solve that problem. But to hear that you're over in the States as well, I think is superb. From this small idea and this dream is now what seems to be a bit of a global juggernaut, Martin. So
well, I wouldn't describe it as a juggernaut, but it's you know, it's growing, and it's a lot of people. I remember the happy days when we could get all of our employees in one room and around one, you know, dinner table, and we're in pretty much every time zone now. And it's very difficult to, you know, it's difficult to have a team meeting and have all of the business together on one call. But it's incredibly kind of rewarding and satisfying to be able to do something that's so helpful and is reaching so many people. It's really good. My daughter's dyslexic, actually, and she's training to be a dentist. She's a second-year dentist, and you know, everyone's dyslexia is a little bit different, and hers is if she doesn't read aloud, if she reads silently, she just doesn't remember it. So she has to hear it to remember it. And so for the last, you know, through her A-levels and her dental studies, if you walk past her bedroom, she would be reading aloud to herself, or the computer would be reading aloud. And but you know what? She's flying. She's doing really well. I think you know, people who get diagnosed with dyslexia when they're at school should really not be disheartened, and really should. It's almost like a badge of honor, I think. And you're absolutely right. You know, there's a determination that people with dyslexia kind of must have to, you know, to push through that and find the thing that they're really, really good at. And you know, the reading piece, it's not that it's easy to, you know, get technology to read for you and to get technology to help you to write. When I take my glasses off, I can't read, but it, you know, and so my glasses are my assistive technology, and it's just the same way for dyslexic people. I like, you know, in schools in the US, for example, 12% of kids are in special education. So they'll have dyslexia, they'll be on the autism spectrum, they'll have, you know, physical disabilities, you know, visual impairment or whatever. And when they leave school, they don't leave their dyslexia behind or their autism behind. they take it with them into the workplace. And in school, we have special education, and we need to make work special. We need to make sure that HR departments are aware that 8% of their employees are probably dyslexic, and they won't put their hand up and say, "Hey, I'm dyslexic. I need help." And they just need to assume that those dyslexic people are there and have the stuff there to support them.
And that is a significant number as well. In particular, when we think of neurodiversity, something which is an invisible diversity. There's many diversities that we see on the surface level, but many more that are not visible to the naked eye should we not either ask the question or look at putting in interventions and have workforces talk about this proactively and openly, that allow that curation of the safe space internally that says, hey, we're proud of our differences, we're proud of our employees thinking differently. And it is ultimately, it's a societal requirement right now, because we need that innovation in order to drive forth what is arguably one of the most interesting times in the workplace right now.
Yeah, completely. And there's I know at home here in Northern Ireland, it is difficult for us to find staff. There's like a really buoyant software engineering market in Northern Ireland, and it's difficult for us to attract staff. And I think that in future, in fact now probably, people are going to start deliberately trying to attract dyslexic talent, because it's, dyslexic people are brilliant. They're so good. Our UK marketing person is called Lindsay. She's brilliant. She was dyslexic at university and used our software at university, and then worked for a while in an advertising agency, and then came to work for us. And she's still using our software today. And you know what? She's really good. And people need to understand that dyslexic people are brilliant. They're just brilliant, and we need to get them into the workplace and support them and let them do the thing that they're brilliant at.
Found out that I was dyslexic in my second year of university, and I may have told you this story before, but I remember thinking, wow, that kind of makes some sense now. And whilst at the time I didn't think a huge amount about it, I ended up getting first class honours and the highest mark in my graduating year in business and management. Couldn't get a job for any of these corporates, and I thought to myself, oh my goodness, it's me. Ended up going into varying other different self-started businesses actually, but anyhow, the point is I realized then, and I look back on these earlier years and think there is an amazing amount of systematic inequity within certain organizations that say good looks like this cookie cutter model approach. And especially when you look at the grassroots end of organizations and talent, and how that talent starts to rise up in the classical corporate hierarchy, you realize actually there's a lot of carbon copies of other individuals, when really what we're desperately seeking is the innovation to drive positive change. And I wonder, with your software and some of the things that you've mentioned there, not only with your daughter, also with Lindsay in marketing, who I know is a great individual as well. And I'm trying not to be too biased here as a fellow dyslexic and an advocate of neurodiversity. But talk to me about that journey, the interventions, and how the software is making a difference to the workplace.
So, well, actually, you're right. This starts with recruitment. This starts at the very beginning with recruitment. Whenever people are asked to submit, a written work for their, for like their job application form, for dyslexic people, that can be quite tricky. And so one of the things that we're doing right at the beginning of the journey is making our software available to job applicants. But the way that the software works, kind of from a practical perspective, if someone has to kind of write a report or even write an email or do some written kind of work at the office, typically dyslexic people will there's typically bad spelling, and the normal spell checkers in Microsoft Word and Google Docs and Outlook and so on, they just don't fix dyslexic spelling errors. So we just give people the confidence to write, and they know that. So whenever you're using your phone and you're typing on your phone with your thumbs, it predicts, you can type 2 or 3 letters and it'll predict a word. So we do that, but we do it inside Microsoft Word and inside Outlook and inside wherever your workplace is. And we just give people the confidence to write, and they know that there aren't going to be any spelling mistakes, and we can predict ahead, understand context, and really help them be more effective, and kind of really get the thoughts out of their head and onto the page and make themselves understood. Our kind of motto at Texthelp is like we're trying to help people understand and to be understood. And whenever people can't, if they've got comprehension difficulties with text on screen, they just don't, if you don't understand the stuff that's on screen, the world is a confusing place. And if you can understand it, it's just much easier. So we read stuff out loud for people, and we've got kind of talking dictionaries and picture dictionaries. But the written piece is a really important piece. That dyslexic word prediction and dyslexic spelling and grammar checking really give people the confidence to be their best selves at work. And we've got, actually, there's a really good video on our website of a lady who talks about that, and it just, the confidence that it gave her, and it'll give her the confidence to actually seek, career growth and apply for promotions that she wouldn't have done otherwise. And that is a really rewarding thing. It's really good to see it happening in the workplace. It happens in school as well, because we've got stories about kids who, wouldn't go to school, were refusing to go to school, fighting. This kid was fighting with his mother. This is like a true story about a kid in Minneapolis, and he was about 8 years old, 9 years old, did not want to go to school. And he was fighting with his mother, wouldn't do his homework. And the reason why he didn't want to go to school and didn't want to do his homework is because he didn't want to fail. And no one wants to fail. Like, everyone hates failing. And when he got homework, his handwriting was poor, and for an answer, he would write in IDK, which is an abbreviation for I don't know. And then he would get really bad results, and then he wouldn't want to go back to school. And his mother found out, realized he was dyslexic, had him diagnosed, and found out about our software and asked for permission to, for the kid to use the software and hand his homework in, typed rather than handwritten. And the teacher said, yeah, sure, of course. And it transformed his homework. He was able to write and able to spell, and he kind of re-engaged with education. And I mean, he was a real problem child in the class, a problem relationship with his mother, and just giving him the confidence to write and the ability to write completely turned things around. And he's, happy school kid. This is a few years ago now, so he's actually gone through to high school and graduated high school. So it's really good, satisfying thing to be able to make a difference. And that, to allow people to go for jobs that they otherwise wouldn't be able to go for, I think it's a really good thing. Do you know that LinkedIn, I think yesterday, added dyslexic thinking as a skill?
Yes, I saw that. It was brilliant, and it's one of the drop downs. I'd seen something around Richard Branson. Richard Branson's one of the famous dyslexics, and I believe it was one of his newsletters as well. I thought, that is so interesting, but it's in as a skill, which is the even better thing. Totally. Sometimes the language we use, it denotes something as positive or negative, and formatively we talk about learning difficulties and things like this. It automatically puts a slightly negative connotation that makes us shrink back into ourselves. And you mentioned their confidence. It is so much about having this confidence at the heart and soul of what we are doing. And in particular, with the young child in Minneapolis that you mentioned, it makes me think of a stat that I've said time and time again, that is around 30% of time goes into worrying about not feeling that you fit in or not feeling you belong in a certain circumstance. And take that in the workplace, thinking about, whether it's the workplace, whether it's education, in school, in earlier days of career. that amount of time, if it went into expending positive outcomes and effort, think about where productivity would be.
Yeah, totally. I completely agree. I'm excited about the LinkedIn thing. I think that's great. That's that's a sort of thing that's just appearing now, and the next generation of kind of young people who see LinkedIn for the first time, they'll just think that's normal. That like dyslexic thinking is a skill. Hey, brilliant. I think that's really good. Do you know in the UK, GCHQ, which is I know this is a global podcast, so for the people internationally who are unaware, GCHQ is like the UK's version of the NSA. It's our spy agency, and they deliberately hire dyslexic people because they think differently. And in fact, our software is in use in GCHQ. We had to go through a whole security review to get it approved for use in there. And yeah, so like I think GCHQ were one of the first people that we saw in the UK deliberately recruiting for dyslexic people. But it's really good to see LinkedIn listing it as a skill. Like that means that people who use LinkedIn as a recruiting tool can now actively search for dyslexic people. I think that's brilliant. I think that's absolutely fantastic. I mean, if you want to actively, seek a more diverse workforce, you can now search for dyslexic people. I think it's brilliant. I think it's really, really good.
See how enthusiastic you are about it, and I echo that in its entirety, given the fact that these are people that have done some of the most brilliant things and created some of the most brilliant inventions in the world and the workplace that we know today. Now, talk to me a little bit about some of the different types, because I know to the naked eye, for anyone who's listening and thinking, this is absolutely fascinating, rich, diverse thinking through different diverse mindsets. And you're absolutely right. There's lots and lots of different types of dyslexia and lots of different types of neurodiverse individuals. Everything from dyslexia, dyspraxia, certain elements of mental health and even Tourette's, ADHD, to name but a few. How do you see the future of these different types of learning abilities starting to frame out in the workplace?
So I think that I really do think there's a zeitgeist, there's a change that's happening, and I think people are really starting to talk openly about being dyslexic and being on the autism spectrum, and just to have employers being open to employing like a diverse workforce. I think we need to be getting there. All businesses need to have a workforce that accurately reflects the population that they serve. But there are a huge variety of, like, dyslexia has manifests itself in a huge variety of ways. Like, my daughter can read really well, but she won't remember anything if she doesn't read it out loud. She has to process it orally to remember. But lots of dyslexic people have got like a visual processing disorder, and they'll kind of mirror image their D's and B's. Quite a few people have like an auditory processing disorder where they can read visually, but they don't remember, they can't process it as well by listening. There are a lot of dyslexic people really struggle with, with spelling specifically because of phonics. So the story behind this is really quite interesting. Human beings are a conversational species, right? So we've evolved over a jillion years, and until really quite recently, there wasn't any writing, there wasn't any printing, there wasn't stuff on screen that we had to read aloud. We just spoke to each other. And the writing piece is new, and we're really, when we read and we write, we are really encoding and decoding the sound of the words. So whenever we look at a word, we turn it into a sound, and the sound in our head is what retrieves the meaning. And many dyslexic people can't make that little jump from what the word looks like to what the word sounds like. And that is that's one of the reasons why reading aloud, having a computer read the stuff aloud to you, really helps with comprehension for a lot of dyslexic people. But autism has got a huge spectrum as well. Some people, I'm probably like, we're all on it. I'm probably on it. My wife will tell you that I'm on it. I'm a creature of habit, and I don't like my routine to be, to be changed. And people who are on the spectrum, very often that becomes quite a profound thing, and they don't like a lot of change at work. And employers need to learn about that, so that people probably have people on the spectrum in their workforce, and they're not aware of it. In some cases, employees aren't aware of it either, and employers need to learn about that and make sure that if they've got someone for whom routine is important, they let them keep their routine, because that's when they're going to do their best work and be their whole selves. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's there are a huge variety of ways that dyslexia manifests itself, and accordingly, there are a huge number of ways that we can support people with dyslexia as well. Some people need help with reading, some people need help with writing, some people need help with organization. So tools like task lists and spider diagramming tools to help people just think or organize their thinking. All those tools are really useful. And I'm super easy. It's kind of like me with my glasses. I mean, if my investors thought that they could buy me a pair of glasses and help me be better, they would absolutely do it. And it's the same with tools and accommodations for neurodiverse workforce. I think as soon as employers understand that there are accommodations that are available and that can create a more inclusive and supportive workforce, then I'm pretty sure they'd be very happy to put them in place.
And I know at Texthelp, it is your mission to unlock everyone's full abilities and realize ultimately their unique potential, which speaks back into everything you've articulated there. Is there's so many different ways and means these things can manifest themselves. We mustn't look at this as negative. We must look at this in the way of, why would we not put in positive interventions in order to ultimately benefit business and then benefit wider society? You're talking about some of the examples there, the practical interventions, be it the glasses, the reading out aloud. I'm sure there's a number of people listening in thinking, oh my goodness, I do that. I remember going on the dyslexia test, and they said, well, there's various different tests actually there were at the time, and again I'm sure they have changed, and they said, well, it's the shelf is smaller in essence, and so there's only a certain amount of information that can be kept for it basically falls then off the shelf. But that creative problem solving, to your point, is there are many different ways that technology can help and support this, and looking at those differences, being open to those differences, is what we really do need. Now, I wonder, before we go into a brief lightning round at the end of this podcast, whether you could talk to us about what you'd love to see in the future in terms of your vision for the organization and the world that we're wanting to create in business when it comes to accessibility for all.
Yeah, happy to do that. So we've made our vision public, and it's at text.help/vision. But our big picture, the problem that we're trying to solve is for 12% of kids who are in special education, or 17% of kids who are learning in a second language or have come from a different culture, or for all of the adults in the workplace who are dyslexic and find reading a little bit difficult. The world is hard for them to understand, and we are trying to make it easy for them to understand and trying to support their literacy. And our big picture moonshot, our crazy big, hairy, big ass goal, is to try to positively impact the literacy and understanding of 1 billion people by 2030. And obviously that's going to mean reaching people in Asia, India. At the moment we're just dipping our toe in that market. We're very strong in the Nordics, we're very strong in the UK, and we're very strong across the US and Canada. We're just getting into the the eastern side of things now. We've actually an office in Brisbane now to serve Southeast Asia. But the societal change that we are trying to achieve is the important one. We want people to think differently about neurodiverse employees, and specifically we're kind of focused on dyslexic employees. That's our area of specialism, and really understand that dyslexic thinking is a benefit, and it's easy, super easy to support dyslexic people in the workplace. It's not something that you have to kind of worry about. You know, diversity and inclusion officers in, you know, big companies around the world have got a tough job, a big job to do. And if you think about it, usually gender and race are the top two kind of things that they're thinking about, and disability comes further down the list. And if you need to like change the gender ratio in a business, or change the race ratio in a business, it takes years and years and years. If you're like a 10,000 person company and you want to change the ratio of males to females in that business, it takes years of recruitment and change to drive that change. Supporting neurodiverse employees is something that you can do really easily and really, you know, really quite quickly. And so part of our vision is exactly that. It's like having all large companies having a policy for neurodiverse employees and having tools that are available, you know, to everyone in the company, so that they don't have to put their hand up and say, hey, by the way, I've got this specific difficulty, because people worry about disclosing that and it being a career limiting kind of disclosure. I really want that to change, so that people I want people to wear dyslexia as a badge of honor. It's something that they should be proud of, because, you know, it's just like having blue eyes, or, you know, or green eyes. It's just, you know, having some dyslexic traits, I think, is a good thing. So that's kind of what we would like to see.
It's so interesting that you talk about self-disclosure, because the way that we frame that in terms of language, it immediately makes people think, oh my goodness, I'm disclosing something that I oughtn't to be. And so when you turn it on its head and you look at it in a positive way and say, hey, hurrah, this is something that we're championing, we have interventions in place already, immediately there is the presumption that this is a place that welcomes individuals who have different ways of thinking. This is so fascinating that you say self-disclosure. I was having this very, very debate with brilliant financial services organization, saying, let's scrap the word self-disclosure. And I thought that's really great to hear. I think as we go on this evolutionary journey, and I know you were talking about the human form and how the mind works in early kind of, you know, cave person days. Well, this is an evolution that we need to go on ultimately in the workplace as well. How can we create these safe spaces that allow people to really truly bring themselves to work, but also that we have interventions there already that help assist high performance teams ultimately? Because without having those, and I can't stand the expression the chicken and egg situation, because it's like, well, which way around is it? But ultimately, if you have these interventions, you have this open free speech about the positive aspects of diversity, same as you would, as you say, physical appearance, blue eyes, green eyes, brown eyes, all are great, they are just different ultimately. It allows that you know, the snowball to grow and grow and grow, and for all individuals to thrive. Now, before we wrap up, I'd love just to ask a couple of little lightning round questions for a bit of fun. I'm going to start off with the most difficult one first. In true style, 30 seconds to answer each, Martin. Firstly, what does success look like to you?
Success to me looks like having helped 1 billion people by 2030.
And how about diversity and inclusion? I know it sounds an unusual question, but diversity and inclusion, it means so many different things to different people. As we've clearly learned throughout this conversation, what does diversity and inclusion mean to you personally?
Well, when I think about diversity and inclusion at Texthelp, in the business, you know, it's all the things that you talk about. You know, it's your 10 measures. And at Texthelp, we have really, you know, there are areas where we struggle. Like in Northern Ireland, if you try to recruit software engineers, they are predominantly male. And it's because, follow it right back to university, the gender mix, the gender ratio in university, software engineering courses is hugely biased towards guys, and the marketing is the flip side. Or if you go into our organization, it is really evenly split. I think it's like 53% male and 47% female, which is not too bad, really quite good. But if you drill into it, our software engineering teams are predominantly male and our marketing teams are predominantly female. But that's, that's just a preference thing. Our organization personally is a little bit, it's too white. Our board in particular, is all male. And that's something I really want to try to change, but you don't get to, when investors come along, the board gets formed, and at the moment we have no women on the board. I'd really like to, our external investor board, our senior management team has got a good gender mix. Do you know what? And we do a pretty good job, I think, of hiring, regardless of, we've got a bunch of dyslexic people who are attracted to us because they know we are a company that does stuff for dyslexic people. So we're obviously going to support dyslexic staff, a bunch of staff with, ADHD and all kinds of neurodiverse conditions. Certainly got a few people on the spectrum. I think we do a reasonable job of that. I mean, we can always get a lot better, and it's a never-ending kind of journey of improvement for us. That took longer than 30 seconds.
I'll let you off because it's you, Martin. But what I won't let you off for is no females on the board. I know when we speak next that is going to be different. And
yeah, I should be clear. We do have my chief operating officer is a woman, and my SVP finance is a woman, and we're on the board. But I mean the external investors, the private equity investors, all male. In fact, during my round of private equity, kind of in November 2020, I spoke with 6 companies and went out to dinner with 6 teams, and only one of the teams had a woman. So that whole area just needs to be refreshed. That whole kind of banking and investment and private equity thing needs a bit of an overhaul.
I'm smiling broadly here because this is absolutely another whole podcast, and I'm thinking this is one that we should absolutely orchestrate, or perhaps introduce me to your PE investors, because when you look at ESG investment, and you look at what's happening in the market, the global market for environmental, societal governance, that the S is amplifying beyond recognizable belief. I'm quite convinced that the S will be what the E has been over the last decade. And
I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. In fact, when you go through rounds of investment, one of the things that you've got to do is fill in an ESG survey. And I do think, one of the things, our whole business is S. We're trying to, our whole business is kind of about that. And I do think that is just an incredibly important, and it is a huge growth area. I know that whenever we're looking at any type of investment raising, the kind of ESG policy is very important now. If you're not on top of that stuff, you just won't get investment in the first place.
I'm nodding furiously here and trying to find something that I disagree with you on, Martin. Although I've definitely found something in this. I'm like, ooh, I want to speak to this private equity organisation. But I was reading some statistics the other day, and it's something like, oh my goodness, my statistics, 10, 11%, something like this, of senior investment partners in private equity and VC, venture capital, for those wondering what VC is, emerging markets, less than that. Is put into female-led organizations. And again, then looking at all of those other aspects of diversity and inclusion, be it neurodiversity, be it gender, race, etc., etc., I would bet that we're looking at even smaller numbers there again. So anyone from the PEVC markets, please do reach out, and let's look at this as a next opportunity with which to tackle.
Yeah, I do think there's like there's the British Venture Capital Association who have so they're like an association of all kind of venture capital companies in the UK, and I know some people there, so that would be that's a good group to put you in touch with. There's a private equity summit going on in California in May, which I'm heading over to, and it will be interesting. I should take some photographs just to see what the race and gender mix is like.
Please do, please do. Well, Martin, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast show today. It has been a joy. And also thank you so much for signing our CEO activist Moving the Dial on Diversity pledge. I think the work that you're doing is superb. It's been a really fantastic conversation around many different aspects of dyslexia, why this is ultimately a superpower, how we can change this through the power of technology, speech, language, and I particularly like your discussion around how this enables people to be able to actually express themselves. I think a lot of this comes down to confidence. That's something that I've learned. I've heard it as a bit of a common golden thread throughout the conversation we have had is how can we give confidence across the entire board? And that's from education, when you were talking about early intervention, right the way through to how that manifests itself within the corporate environment and the workplace ultimately. We cannot get anywhere without moving the needle on physical, tangible interventions. And what you are doing through the power of Texthelp and making the workplace more accessible to all is to be commended. So I wish you so much luck on the growing journey internationally, and I'm really looking forward to speaking with you again very soon.
Absolutely, and thank you, Lilia. And you know, that I kind of right back at you. The work that you're doing with Dial Global is incredibly important, and I think you're doing a fantastic job. And we're looking forward to partnering with you. I think it's you're doing the thing that really needs to be done. It's a hugely important thing, and I commend you. I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you so much, Martin. My name is Leila McKenzie-Delis, founder and CEO of Dial Global. You've been listening to Martin McKay, CEO and founder of Texthelp. If you would like to re-listen to the podcast, or you feel you've missed any of the key learning nuggets of wisdom, don't worry at all. We will provide show notes at the end of today's show. There'll also be a summary of some of the key points, interventions, and links to everything that has been mentioned there by Martin today. If you have been affected, make sure you're not a stranger. Make sure you reach out to one of the team or I. You can visit us on the Dial Global Network app or at dialglobal.com/podcast. And in the meanwhile, we will look forward to seeing you again very soon. But take care for now.